This week we have a very special guest, someone who had ran a podcast at one time, who has done interviewed many people, much like myself. He is a very talented author. He's got a library of books, so I guess I'll just start there. He's a best-selling author, author of Materialism and Death or Superstitions, Life After Death, Powerful Evidence You Will Never Die, Life After Death, Achieve Joy Now, and Bliss in the Afterlife, Your Cosmic Mind Power, Reincarnation, Good News for Open-Minded Christians and Other Truth Seekers. He has many other books that kind of evolve, like After Death, Universal Consciousness, them types of works, kind of what we're into on this show. His written catalog is very extraordinary. So, I please encourage you guys to check out his work. I'd like to welcome Stephen Hawley Martin to the show. How you doing, Stephen?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Dylan. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, thanks again for joining this show and taking the time out to do this. I know you're a busy guy. You got a lot going on. How many books have you written?
I think it's over 3 dozen. There are, if you go to my website at shmartin.com, you click on fiction and nonfiction books, the tab up at the top. I think there's 36 on that page, but there are actually some I didn't put on there because they don't sell that well. But anyway, yeah, at least 3 dozen.
That's an impressive number. And then out of those books, where do you typically get your research from? Is it from like written, maybe, I don't know, where do you get it from? Interviewing people, written work?
Mostly from interviewing people. As you mentioned, I had a podcast at one time, went for about 3 years, did over 100 shows, and I was interviewing people like the ones you have on your show. Near-death survivors, people who are studying the paranormal, quantum physicists, on and on. I really got a lot of information from that, and I use it in my books a lot of what I learned.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's where a lot of it comes from. And of course, I've done a lot of reading. When I was in my 20s, I joined the Rosicrucian Order, which is a society of people who study metaphysical laws. And I went through their whole course, went from being a novice to an adept. And I can tell you that the Rosicrucians do know what's going on. They know what reality is about. And basically what I've learned since then is just sort of confirmed what I already knew from the Rosicrucians.
All right, so you obviously have a need to maybe understand and share with others, which I love that about you. In many ways, like I said, I can relate. What is maybe your desire, or what motivates you to try to have this understanding and to share this with so many people?
Well, Dylan, I grew up in a family of what I would call scientific materialists. People, my mom and dad are like many scientists today. Most scientists today believe that the only thing that exists is physical matter, physical substance, and that everything comes from that consciousness is created by the brain, which means that matter creates consciousness. And that's what I believed up until I was about 25 years old. And I had a very strange experience when I was about that age. I had a bad case of the flu, and I had an out-of-body experience where I found myself up at the ceiling looking down at my kind of passed out body on the bed. It wasn't really a near-death experience, I don't think, at least not in the classic sense, where you go see the light and go through the tunnel and, your grandmother or somebody greets you. It was just a very quick thing, but it was enough but it was very real and very vivid. And it started me thinking, how can I be up here looking down at my body if my brain creates consciousness? And that's what started me on this quest.
That's fascinating. And now that started you on the quest, but is there like this, what is it? I mean, it's got to be something, perhaps it's within. Is there this feeling or this drive? What?
The reason I write all the books and keep writing them is because I sincerely believe that if people understood what this reality we're in is really all about, the world would be so much better than it is. I mean, people who believe the scientific materialists that all that exists is matter, if you really believe that, that means that when you die, you're dead. You know, it's like flipping off a switch off of, pulling the plug on a vacuum cleaner or something, and then it's over. And so that's got to lead to nihilism, the idea that, life's a bitch and then you die. And that's not true. I mean, we are eternal beings who are having a temporary physical experience. And on the years since I've started studying all this and done the Rosicrucian thing and talked to all those people, I've come to the conclusion that what physical reality is, when we come into it, we're in physical bodies, but we're actually spiritual beings inhabiting these physical bodies. And we come into this reality because Earth is a school, and that the purpose of it all is to learn and to evolve. And, in one of my books, I say the secret of life is the urge to become. That's, if you look around at nature and you see what's going on, everything is becoming. The trees are becoming, the flowers are becoming, the birds and the bees are becoming, and you and I are becoming. And that's why we're here. And yet, people face difficulties in life. We all do. Life is difficult. But the reason it's difficult is because those things that we face and we overcome make us a better person. We're here to learn things like patience, tenacity, compassion, all those qualities that can come from experiencing difficulties and overcoming them, or at least facing them. So, if people understood that, imagine what a great world this would be. But also that we're really all one. There's only one consciousness, and we're each kind of windows on it. The idea that we're all one is something that mystics have been saying for thousands of years, but I believe it. And I've had an experience where I experienced that later on. And after that out of body experience, about 10 years later, was meditating and really got in touch with the higher consciousness, and it was absolutely a mind-blowing experience. So there you go.
I can buy into that. We're all one. There's a connection aspect, a way that you can connect with others, that in a lot of different ways. Team sports is one, just working on a project with a group of people, or just one-on-one with somebody, having a talk, having a heart-to-heart. Sometimes you can connect on a deep level that's real similar. So real quick, can you just say that one more time about the purpose of life becoming? Because I want you to say that, and then I think audience members should just maybe pause it and just sit with that for a minute and just take that in, because that's deep. And I think if you really just think on what you said, it could have some deep meaning.
Well, let me build up to that a little bit. I think that there is that consciousness. Well, first of all, the ground of being, what we all come from is energy, vibrations. Quantum physicists will tell you that. That's what, there's really no such thing as the solid substance in the way that scientific materialists think of it. It's vibrations. And from that, I think, is consciousness. So consciousness is universal, and consciousness is what creates reality. And that consciousness, that universal consciousness that we're all part of, that we all come from, that we're all aspects of, is evolving. And the way it evolves is through the life that it has created. And so the secret of life is the urge to become. We all have the urge to become more than we are. And that is what drives the universal mind. And that is what drives each one of us who are aspects of the universal mind, and not just us humans, but all life of all kinds is becoming. It's always becoming. And I've written a novel about this. It's called The Secret of Life. And I've also written about it in my nonfiction books. So I'm convinced that that's what life is about. And once everyone, I wish it were taught in school, because not only would people know that going through difficulties is part of life and part of the reason you're here, but also they would come to understand that we're all one. We all come from the same place, the same source. And that, I'm not a religious person, but I think that Jesus was right on when he said, love your neighbor and, love your enemy. Because if we all did that, it would create what he was trying to create, which is the kingdom of heaven on earth. So if you want to sit with it, is the secret of life is the urge to become. There you go.
That's well said. Well said. So reincarnation, the afterlife, perhaps a Christian view, or just another consciousness of surviving the bodily death. I obviously kind of know your thoughts on it, but kind of, can you talk a little bit about that? And then, maybe, I don't know if you have any examples that come to mind or anything in your written work that can kind of express some of reincarnation, and maybe even offer up some truth to it, or some proof of it.
Yeah, be happy to. The University of Virginia School of Medicine has a division called the Division of Perceptual Studies. And there was a professor there, his name was Ian Stevenson. He was a psychiatrist and a instructor there in the school, at medical school at the University of Virginia. And he got interested in the idea of reincarnation. Ian Stevenson was actually a Canadian who graduated first in his class from McGill University in Canada, which is kind of Canada's equivalent to Harvard. I mean, he was a smart guy, but he got interested in reincarnation because in his psychiatric practice, he came across children who remembered or said they remembered a past life. So he started studying that in 1962. That's 60 years ago, 1962. And the University of Virginia, later on in 1967, I believe it was, Ian Stevenson published a book in 1966 called 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. And what it did is laid out the children with past life memories that he'd studied, 20 of them. Well, a guy named, who I don't remember his name, but he, I believe, was the fellow who invented the Xerox machine. And he had made a bunch of money, and he was interested in reincarnation. I guess he read Stevenson's book and donated a big pot of money to University of Virginia, something, like $100 million or something crazy. And for them to study reincarnation. So they took that money and in 1967 founded the Division of Perceptual Studies. That unit of the medical school there continues today. It's been going since 1967. They now have more than 2,500 cases of children who say they remembered a past life that they studied. The last time I checked, 1,700 of those cases had been solved, is what they call it, where they were able to identify someone who fit the description that the child was talking about, having been in this past life, the name of the person, the place where they lived, the name of the wife, the name of the children, the job he had, those kind of things matched what the kid was saying. They've got over 1,700 of them, all of which they put into a database, and they can cross tab and give you a whole bunch of information about that. Now, I think one of the reasons that the children remembered it, because a high percentage of those cases were people who in their past life was cut short. They were killed in the war, they were murdered, they were killed in an automobile accident, something happened, unnatural sort of thing happened, and they died before they really lived their full life. So I think they came back quickly. The average time between the child's birth and his previous life death is only 15 months. There's some outliers.
That's interesting. That's interesting though.
But basically, anybody who doubts reincarnation happens, that you might want to check that out. Google the Division of Perceptual Studies, University of Virginia School of Medicine, and it's all there. You can go on YouTube and put something about it, and you'll have all kinds of things come up. It just hadn't been reported on in the mainstream media because of the Christian idea that reincarnation doesn't exist. But the fact of the matter is, reincarnation was part of Christianity up until 553, the Second Council of Constantine, when Constantine the emperor put the pressure on the Pope to eliminate reincarnation from Christian doctrine. There are passages in the Bible where it's obvious that Jesus himself believed in reincarnation.
It was done out of control, right?
Well,
to control the masses.
What it was is, if you believed you're going to have another chance, you weren't going to do what you were told by the church.
Right. That's right.
And ultimately the emperor, who was Constantine.
Right.
So yeah, it was a control issue. I'll give you an example, just a quick one on Jesus. There's a section, I think it's in 2 of the Gospels, where Jesus asks his disciples, "Who do people think I am?" And the disciples say, "Well, some people think you're John the Baptist. Other people think you're one of the prophets, particularly Elijah." Well, the last prophet, Elijah, died for Jesus. So if he was Elijah, he would have to be Elijah reincarnated. Jesus didn't say, "Well, no, I'm not Elijah." He said, but he didn't dispute that possibility. There are other examples I won't go into, but they're definitely in there. In fact, one of the people I interviewed in my time doing a podcast is still is the head of the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, which is the institute that Edgar Casey founded back in the 1930s. And this gentleman told me that he's found 11 examples in Matthew's gospel alone that make reference to reincarnation. If you know what they don't use the word reincarnation, but it's obvious that's what they're talking about. So there you go.
That's fascinating. And my next question, actually, it's one of my listeners' questions. They found out you were coming on the show, but I think it relates in relation to this. Maybe based on what you know and the people that you've interviewed and talked to, do you believe that past lives potentially influence our current life in any way, like when it comes to maybe decision making, financial, love, job, occupation, or anything really?
Absolutely do. I think that we all have lived many times, some of us more times than others, because we like it here, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, we definitely come back to finish unfinished business, to overcome karma. And we could talk about karma because that's kind of a complicated subject. It's not, I think, what people normally think of when they talk about karma. But I have a kind of model that I built in my mind about how that works. And what do they call those Russian dolls, those nesting dolls? You know what
Oh
I'm talking?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I can't think of it. It starts with an M. But anyway, I look at us as being that little tiny one that's way down at the bottom inside all those others. And we come into this dimension, this physical reality. And when we do, we pass through a veil of forgetting. We don't remember any past lives. Most of us don't. Those children that were in that University of Virginia study and remembered it, but that's unusual. And the reason we don't is that we're here to grow, develop, become more than we were. And the way we do that is by facing situations. And so we decide kind of where we're going to be born, who our parents are going to be, that sort of thing, so that we'll kind of have a setup of probably meeting the kinds of things we need to meet in order to overcome them and learn what we need to learn. And if we remembered what we were here to do, it would be like giving us the answers to the test and then handing us the test. You know, we wouldn't really learn anything. We've got to kind of do it our own and really absorb it and make it part of us. And
Yeah.
that's what we do. But the nesting doll, each one of those other dolls over it is a past incarnation up to the outside doll that encapsulates all of them. That's our higher self and knows all that already. And even that higher self, I think, is connected to the universal mind, the collective unconscious that we're all part of. And so it's really goes from our little self all the way up to the whole big picture, the infinite mind. And we're down here in this little one, but we're helping it all evolve, each one of us. We're evolving ourselves,
Yeah.
and we're evolving all the rest of it.
Yeah, the consciousness itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's perhaps why we also come into this life not with little to no information on past lives, right? Is just to have another unique experience for this lifetime. And you know, even though you got to learn to talk again, walk again, you know, different dynamics. But I think perhaps if you carried a lot of the memories over, it would maybe influence the way that you develop or you are, right, as in
Absolutely.
this experience. So you need to have like that blank slate.
Yeah, you need the blank slate so that you don't answers to the test before and then have it handed to you. That makes it, you're not going to really learn that way. And I think that we probably pick where we come. Will say one thing. I do think that there's certain things that come through. Talents, for example. You'll find somebody who is a kind of a child prodigy and as a musician learns to play instruments very easily, or someone who learns a foreign language easily. Those kinds of things are from past lives, and they're in our subconscious or collective conscious than that doll that's kind of up here, and it's a whole lot easier to pull it out. I mean, I have certain talents I know that I must have gotten from previous lives, and I've had psychics tell me that. So I do think that some of it comes through our basic personality, our kind of maybe some things come easier to us because we learned them in a past life, that sort of thing. But as far as the actual memories, I'm sure you've had people on who do past life regressions. It is possible to get someone hypnotized and have them recall past lives.
Yes, it is. And the thing I find fascinating is having experts like yourself and others, and maybe not even necessarily, you know, all in one branch of something, but, you know, kind of scattered all over. Maybe a psychic medium here, a near-death experiencer there, but everybody kind of has the same general idea or story behind what's going on in our reality, to a degree, you know what I mean? And it's just, I think people are on to something here, you know, with all this.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I think so. And yeah, it all for me, it fits together. It took me a while, but I see how, it all kind of makes sense. Makes so much more sense than the idea that, that you you live, life's a bitch, and then you die. That makes no sense.
Yeah, it makes none. And I always struggled with when I was, back, I think when I was a materialistic believer, back in my younger days. I think I always struggled with the idea of, say, a 5 or 6 year old having cancer and then dying, like, and thinking like, how is that fair that they got that one life, but then you've got somebody over here who lives 80 years and has a full life. And I couldn't wrap my head around that. It didn't make sense to me.
And the idea, if you're a Christian, that, somebody who lives in, I don't know, top of a mountain in Tibet, never even heard of Christianity, they don't have a chance to go to heaven. Come on.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So why the illusion of death? I mean, I think I have my theories and reasons behind, I think, why we have this in this material world. We have this illusion that, death is final, and that, like, when a loved one passes away, I mean, it's still a hard thing for us to deal with, but why the illusion? What's the point?
What's the point of the illusion? I think that it's more what's the point of physical reality. And I think the point of physical reality is that we're here to experience what it's like to be separate and to think that we're separate, that you're over there and I'm over here. And, I've got to protect what I want. I expect you need to protect what you want, when the reality is that we're all one. And when they're in that other dimension, we know that. I mean, it's okay. Now, the reason we think death is final is because of scientific materialism. And how did scientific materialism come to be? Well, back in the 18th century, actually, so it was the 17th century, there was late 1600s, there was an English philosopher named Thomas Hobbes. And Thomas Hobbes, he wrote the Leviathan. People paid attention to Thomas Hobbes. He was railing against witchcraft, and the idea of witchcraft was something that, went on back then. People were getting hanged or burned at the stake for. Well, he said, it can't be. If God created everything, then that's all there is. And everything is, this material world. Well, intellectuals bought into that idea that God created it and that's all there is. There's nothing, if you can't see it, it doesn't exist. Well, people like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and those guys in the 18th century became, because of that, what's called deists, and also called the great clockmaker theory. The idea that God made the universe, created it like a clock, everything works together, and then he wound it up and let it go, and he's no longer involved. That's the idea of deism, which was what intellectuals thought back in the 18th century. Then in the 19th century, along comes Charles Darwin and comes up with this theory of survival of the fittest, or the natural selection, which enabled them to eliminate God altogether. It all happened by accident, and we evolved because of survival of the fittest and natural selection. So that is when materialism came to be, about 150 or 60, 70 years ago. And it's still holding on today, even though quantum physicists tell us that there really is no such thing as matter, that it's all energy, E equals mc squared. And as far as Darwin is concerned, my argument there, I've got a bunch of arguments, but the most compelling one, I think, is that the DNA molecule in each one of our cells in our body is a supercoiled molecule that if you stretched it all out, it would be over 6 feet long, 2 meters long, 6 feet, 6 inches long. And That 6 feet 6 inches is like computer code. If you've ever seen a printout of DNA, you know what I'm talking about. It's like computer code. Well, that computer code, like stuff, tells the cell how to make certain proteins and when to make them and all that kind of stuff. And every cell in your body has that in it, 6 feet 6 inches, that computer code. Now, did 6 feet 6 inches of microscopic size computer code happen by accident? As Charles Darwin would have said, I don't think so. And mathematicians will tell you that it's not impossible, but virtually impossible. And given the fact that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old and that life came to be on Earth 3.77 billion years ago, that only gives about 700 million years for that to have happened by accident. And I think a mathematician would tell you it can't be.
Right.
It's impossible.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when you really break it down and think about just everything, just anything in nature and how everything's connected and it's in a cycle, like it's not an accident.
It can't be.
No.
It can't be.
No. That's fascinating. Now, your thoughts on time, because so there's some really brilliant thinkers out there that talk about that, like there is no past, there is no present, that there's only the now, and we live in the now. And I can kind of get on board with that, and I like that thought based on when you're trying to, I guess, not fret over future events, or you're just trying to live in the now and enjoy the moment. I love that aspect of it, but I can't seem to wrap my head around like there is no past, because if I don't know, I just can't, because if there's a group of guys that go out and they lay a foundation for a house and then they come home and go to sleep the next day, the foundation's still there, and they're continuing to build it. So like something happened, you know, in the past that allowed them to do that. Like I have a hard time with that. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, do have some thoughts on that. First of all, the idea is that the past is a concept, and the past is a memory, and the future is a concept. But the only time that we really are is now, and that just kind of is all the time. But here's the way I look at it. It's like in this reality where we are, it's like we're standing in a river, and where we are standing is now. But the water is going by, and that's time and water passing by, and some of it's behind us and some of it's in front of us. But if we were an eagle or a helicopter and we were up, thousands of feet looking down, we'd be able to see the whole river from the start to the finish if we were up high enough. And that's what it's like if we're not in this reality, that it's all there at once. But in this reality, we're standing in the river, and that's the way I look at it. That's
a cool way to look at it. I think that makes sense, and it definitely explains a lot. That's fascinating. So the mind, as you know, is very powerful, and it can influence reality. There's a camp out there that kind of believes that our mind can actually do even more than influence reality, but it actually kind of can create reality or generate or change your reality or kind of write your future. They talk a lot about this in health and in other things. Some of these other researchers are talking about. What are your thoughts on that idea?
Well, I'm not sure whether they're talking about psychokinesis, which is the idea of mind over matter. And certainly J.B. Rhine at the Duke University studied that, and he saw that statistically it is possible for a mind to control reality to a certain extent. And he was using things like wheels of, the gambling wheels, roulette kind of things. But what I think is definitely true is that your mind does create your personal reality. And that really goes back to the fundamental law of metaphysics, which I learned back when I was in the Rosicrucian Society, and it really contributes to practically every other metaphysical law. And the basic law, fundamental law of metaphysics is that like attracts like. Now, people who talk about the law of attraction, that's kind of what that is. And I'll give you an example. This also would be an example of karma. I said earlier that karma was a complicated subject.
Yeah.
People think of karma as the law of cause and effect, and in a way it is, but it's not. You're not being punished when something comes back to bite you. It's really coming back to teach you a lesson that you need to change what's in your mind, what's in your makeup, what's in your character. For example, we all know of, if we don't know them personally, we know of people who seem to always attract someone to them who is abusive toward them, who treats them badly. And, they'll go through one significant other after another, and each one of them does that, and they seem to always attract that kind of person. Well, why is that? It's because like attracts like. That person must have a low opinion of themselves, and they attract someone who also has a low opinion of them. And that's why that's their karma, but they can overcome it by realizing, as I said earlier in your show, we're spiritual beings, magnificent, eternal spiritual beings having a physical experience, right? A temporary physical experience. And we don't need to put up with that crap. We need to have a higher opinion of ourselves. We're really quite fantastic spiritual beings. So yes, your mind creates your reality. If you think you're a victim, if you feel like you're a victim, that people discriminate against you, for example, then yes, you're going to be a victim and you're going to be discriminated against, because that's what you're going to attract. Like attracts like.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense.
On the other hand, if you think you're deserve to be a millionaire and that good things are going to happen and you feel good about it, that'll happen.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. What do you think, besides being a school, I guess, is the purpose of Earth in this universe just for consciousness to have experiences in different physical incarnations of, grasshoppers and birds and people and trees and plants? And
there's a couple of views on that. One is that I think it was Edgar Casey in some of his readings said that Earth was really not meant to have human habitation, that we spirits just wanted to come here to as part of a kind of experiment and find out what it's all about, and we kind of got stuck here. Now we're trying to get out. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's one view. There's certainly others who think that we are kind of like fallen angels, where we were all happy and part of God and all that, and we rebelled, like Lucifer, and left and came into this reality, and now we've forgotten all that and we're trying to get out. I don't know if that's true or not. There may be something to it. But I do think that the main thing is that we come here to experience and to learn, and the reason Earth is a good place to do that is because we do have this illusion when we're here that we are separate and apart, whereas when we're on the other side, it's quite obvious that we're not, that we're all one, that we communicate to one another on the other side through telepathy. We don't have vocal cords, we can't speak. So we think something and that thought is picked up, and that person thinks something back, because we're all just kind of one being that's, has our little bit, it's separation. I mean, we've got our past life memories and our current life memories and so on. We've got our own little mind. We're like little whirlpools of mind, that are interacting.
They're
Whereas here
flowing
we
like
got
in a
this
river.
flesh that makes us think we're totally separate. And that makes it a difficult place to be, but it's also a place where you can learn a lot faster.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think life is difficult. And I mean, I think challenges are good though. And but there's also a lot of beauty and a lot of, a lot of wonderful things that you can experience in the physical. Uh
I agree. I agree with that
yeah.
too. It's
I
absolutely so.
I think I just wish that I think as a human species, I just wish that we were more loving to one another than we currently seem to be. But
Well, there are some people who think that we're going through a transition now. I mean, we're obviously in today's world, it seems to be totally in flux and chaos, and maybe we are about to enter a new age, if you will. Uh, if you're familiar with the raw material that was channeled back in the early 1980s, uh, that material says that we would pass from third density to fourth density. We would begin the transition in 2012. And
that isn't that that's not the end of the Mayan calendar, is it?
it is also the year of the end of the Mayan calendar, which is an interesting, I don't know, coincidence, because this material was channeled back in early 80s. So I think started in 1982.
There's no coincidences, man. There's no coincidence. There's no
Right.
such thing.
But yeah, so I mean, we're now entering into the fourth density reality, and one of the hallmarks of the fourth density is that we come to realize that we really all are one, and we we start getting along better. And the people who are, there's really, you have to make a choice. I've written a book about this. It's called Your Guide to Fourth Density or something like that. Look on my website, you'll find it. But it's the idea that you we're going to divide into two separate groups. One is service to others, and the other is service to self. And the service to others is where we use our talents and abilities and what we want to do with our lives to help others. And the service to self for people like Putin and Hitler and maybe some politicians in Washington who really are out for them, looking
No
out for
doubt.
number one.
No doubt.
And the guys who are looking out for number one are not going to be part of this fourth density here. They're going to go somewhere else, another planet next time, not this one. So if that's true, and of course, even Ross said it would take a long time for this to happen, probably 30 or 40 years at the earliest, maybe 100 years at the, it's more like it. So, but we're moving into it. And I think this chaos that we're going through now is kind of the, when things change, that's what happens. Things get all kind of crazy, and then, then we move through it. And hopefully that's what's happening.
Oh man, that's good stuff. I guess I got a couple more quick questions for you. Try to wrap this up. I definitely would like to have you back on sometime. You're a brilliant man. I think there's a lot my listeners can learn from listening to a guy like you. Thoughts on everything having order in the universe, from mathematical equations to synchronicities, or just, is it all an illusion, or is it, I mean, there's obviously some intelligence and some design behind all this, right?
Yeah, I believe that there is an infinite mind that's, consciousness is universal. I think that actually consciousness creates everything, including this reality. When you think about it, none of us experience anything in this reality except through unless we're psychic, some people are, except through our five senses. We don't experience anything of physical reality except through touch, taste, sight, smell, and what's the fifth one? Hearing. So we don't know that there's anything outside of reality except those who are psychic. And they, some people can pick up on.
That's a fascinating thing that you mentioned. You're talking about the five senses. And I often wonder, I don't know if you're familiar with like cryptids or like any of these like alien encounters, but at times it seems as though these things kind of fade in and out of our vision, or are almost like they're there the whole time. Perhaps they're not, I don't know. But it almost seems as if they're there the whole time, but like we're unable to sense that.
I think that they, I think of, I have some thoughts about UFOs. I think that they are coming from another dimension or another reality, and they come in, and maybe they're here to check us out, and then they go away. And the kinds of thing maneuvers that they can make that would be impossible for a physical uh, airplane or something like that to do. That's because they really aren't. They're coming in from another reality, and then they're leaving. I had my very first job out of college was I worked for an ad agency in Baltimore, and I had a boss who had been in the Air Force. I think he retired as a lieutenant colonel, but he'd been a pilot in the Air Force. And he said that once he was flying a transport plane across the Atlantic, and that had a crew of 7 or 8 people on it, that this orb, this kind of round light, but it was an orb, bright light, came up and flew alongside the cockpit for half an hour. Everybody in the plane saw it. I mean, it was there, and it flew along, and then suddenly it just went and went off to the right. It had been flying along with them, at several hundred miles an hour, fast one of those transports goes, and then it just made a right turn and left. And he said he filled out all this paperwork and made did all that stuff, made the statement, everybody attested to it, and he sent it off to the boss, whoever his commanding officer was, and that was the last he heard of it. So
That's crazy. It's crazy, but believable.
But I think that there is a universal mind and that, like you said, all the mathematics, everything works. The one of the theories is that the materialist poo-poo is the idea of fine tuning. Everything is fine tuned so that it works. If everything weren't just right, the earth would go flying off in some direction or other. Nothing would work. It has to be perfect for it to work.
Yeah,
and it is perfect.
Yeah, for life to exist. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, excellent conversation. Where can the listeners check you out? I know you mentioned your website, but please drop it again. And then, where can they maybe pick up some of your written work? Or
Yeah. My website is very easy. My name's Stephen Hawley Martin, and my website is shmartin.com. Most of that website's donated to my consulting business. I'm a marketing consultant. But if you look up at the top on the menu, there's one of the little clickers there that says fiction and nonfiction books. Click on that and you'll see 36 books, the covers of them. You can click on any one of those covers to find out more about that particular book. What it does is take you to the page on Amazon. You can read reviews and see what it's about, maybe read the first chapter or 2 if you want, and buy it if you want. But that's the way to do it. So come to my website, shmartin.com, click on fiction and nonfiction books on the menu at the top, and take you right to those books.
Hey, thanks again for coming on the show.
Hey, it's been fun, Dylan. I enjoyed it very much. I appreciate it.